This month, November 2024, marks 8 years since I officially moved to Paris for good and made it my home. That marks the start of a very interesting time in my life and one that has changed me forever, I think. I will never be the same after those 5 years in Paris. Maybe it's because of this timing, or maybe it's just because this is a topic that I've been thinking about for quite a long time, actually. But I really wanted to talk about French today, or specifically a second language. For you, it might be different, but for me, French is definitely my primary second language. It wasn't my first second language, but it is definitely now and probably forever will be my primary second language. And I really wanted to focus on the aspect of confidence, my confidence in speaking French, now and then and all along the way. I think a lot of us, myself included, definitely more so in the past, and even still today I have this temptation. We think of language learning as a linear progression. You start, you have your first exposure to a language, or your first interest is piqued, then you learn a little bit, you get a little bit better, and you think of it as this step by step by step. You slowly get better, you slowly gain levels, and you just get better. You start knowing nothing, and you get better and better and better until maybe one day you're fluent. Then I think a lot of us, again, myself included, think of fluency as this beautiful plateau that you finally reach the top of the mountain, you have the beautiful view, and it's just smooth sailing from there. But that's not true. Language learning is a lot more complex than that. It's a lot more complicated, and I have definitely experienced this myself, and I've had many different, times in my life that have caused me to have a different relationship with the language, or I've used it differently in different capacities, and I've also felt different about my confidence with the language. First, I want to very briefly fill you in on my background with French, because many of you weren't here probably for every one of those steps, and also some of you might have just forgotten, which is cool. I forget some days, and it's my own journey, so I don't expect any of you guys to actually remember all of these details. So here's the long story short. Sometime around 2015 is when I really would say that I started to try to learn French. I was exposed to it a little bit before that, but when I actually started trying to learn and trying to understand and listening to videos, taking all the free courses I could find online, that was sometime in 2015 when that really started. And then at the end of 2016, I moved to Paris. And that really was the catalyst, I think, for when I started to get better. I did speak a little bit of French before that, when I was interviewing for the job that I had when I first moved to France. I was asked a few very basic questions in French. I was able to give basic responses. So I had a little bit of knowledge and some abilities in French when I moved, but I definitely was not anywhere near fluent, and that came with a lot of practice and with a lot of time living in France. Once I was in France, I was much more immersed. I had a lot more opportunities to hear French, to read French, to speak French. And from there, it definitely felt like the progression was more linear. I think going from really knowing nothing, absolutely nothing, I had no experience with French growing up in my teen years, I studied Spanish, to then studying it, being immersed in it, really, really trying to learn it. That felt very linear. I think if you compared, 2015 to 2016, 16 to 17, 17 to 18, you probably could actually really kind of put that on a stair step. But I think sometime probably around 2018 is when I would say I started to feel like I could say I was fluent. I started to feel comfortable in conversations. I started to be able to, when I didn't know a word, because even when you're fluent, you don't know every word. Not even a lot of native speakers know every word, but you definitely don't as a learner or as a just non-native speaker. But even when I didn't know something, I was able to navigate around it, find a way to explain it, find a way, a different way of expressing that thought. And that's when I would say I started to feel like, okay, I can call myself fluent now. And it was probably sometime around then that I started to feel like maybe this isn't such a linear process. In 2021 is when my husband and I decided we were going to move to New York. So I then was surrounded with English and Spanish and lots of other languages, but very, very little to no French. I did have the same job then as my most recent job when I left Paris. I kept the same job, so I was still working with a, France-based team, still speaking French. And of course, I had also, found lots of vloggers and people that I liked to follow online who were French speakers. So I was constantly still exposed to French every single day, but I was no longer using it in a day-to-day capacity. And it was really interesting because I started noticing there were some things that I didn't lose at all and that I got even more comfortable with. But then there were little things like day-to-day interactions that had felt so comfortable and so easy, and I was so confident in them when I was living in France. And suddenly I wasn't feeling so confident. After a few years in New York, we moved to Montreal. That ended up being shorter than what we wanted, but it was still 7 good months of living in a very bilingual environment. I will say Montreal is very English friendly, and even the French speakers there tended to speak very, very good English. So if they heard you speaking English, like my husband and I would speak English out and about, and if they heard us speaking English, often they would just speak to us in English, and sometimes we'd switch to French, sometimes we wouldn't, just depending on the situation. But I still did hear a lot of French, speak a lot of French, need a lot of French when I was in Montreal. Montreal. And that was interesting. That re-immersion was a very interesting time in my life, reminded me of a lot of things, shook my confidence in some ways, and in other ways, what I was expecting to be really scary was not as scary. Or maybe it was at first, but then it got better. My cat has decided he would like to chime in to this part of the video.
Do you come here with me? Oh. Were you feeling left out because I was talking to my camera and not to you?
I have a guest star now. This is something that is intrinsically linked with personality as well. So I am a type of person who has struggled with self-confidence in many aspects of my life, not just language learning. And some people will struggle less. There's also times in my life when I've struggled a lot more and a lot less. Specifically, I think there are 3 factors that I would say, at least for me personally, have really come into play when it comes to where is my confidence with French right now. The first of these is that the better we get at something and the more knowledge that we have, the more we tend to start to see our gaps and where we're lacking. And that is definitely something that I do with everything, and I have done very frequently when it comes to language learning. Before, when I barely had any level at all, when I could barely do anything, if I would manage the most simplest of interactions, I would be really proud of myself. I would be happy. I would come home that evening and just be ready to brag about the really successful interaction that I had had that day. Whereas later, when I would consider myself fluent, when I was at a level where I could have meetings and conversations with people with, zero or at least very minimal trouble, when I could go out with friends to noisy bars and still manage to speak French the whole night, when I was objectively much, much better and much more capable in the language, if I would have an interaction, because this still happens, if someone randomly in the street would ask you something or stop you or experience a situation when you needed to understand a certain thing or act in a certain way, respond in a certain way, and it didn't work out so well, I would suddenly feel like, I have gone back to square one. I have lost my ability completely. What is wrong with me? And my confidence would just plummet. It is a good thing to always be learning and be stretching ourselves and to realize that we always have something more to learn, no matter how good you get in a second language. There's always something that you haven't encountered yet. On the other side of the coin, we should also never forget to occasionally take a step back, to look at how far we've come, and to pat ourselves on the back, to be proud of ourselves, because it's amazing. Learning another language is amazing. And if you're constantly focusing on what you don't know, then I think sometimes we very much lose sight of what we do know, and that is something I've always struggled with. And I try to do that occasionally. Sometimes I'll go back and watch my old videos where I was either talking about things in French that clearly I did not know as much then as I do now because my perspective is different. I also have videos where I'm speaking French, and sometimes it's interesting to go back and watch those and to realize how far I've come. So yeah, perspective on our language abilities definitely changes as we get better, and it's something to keep in mind when it comes to how confident you're feeling. The second factor is that confidence is something that can change very rapidly. It can change from day to day. It can change even a little bit within a day. It can certainly change from week to week, from month to month. It can depend on the situation that you're in your life, stuff that's happened recently, kind of shakes your confidence, or even something happens in your life that has nothing to do with that second language or language learning in general, but you just have something that shakes your confidence and suddenly you question everything a little bit more. You feel a little bit less good about your abilities in multiple, different domains. It is changeable for some of us more than others, but all of us experience ebbs and flows in our confidence. There are many different ways that we can approach improving our confidence and, getting stronger as people. Some of us will need more intense methods. Some of us might just need a little bit of bolstering from time to time, but it is changeable. It is definitely something that is not linear or stable. So that we really should keep in mind when it comes to how we feel about our language abilities. If you ask me one week how my French is, my answer might be different than it would be the week after. When I was living in France, when I was living in New York, when I was living in Montreal, here now in the Netherlands, when I've worked in certain environments, when my social circles have featured more or less French versus English, it just really depends and it changes a lot. And sometimes it does have to do with your actual level, but a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times it's all these surrounding things in our lives that is affecting how we're able to perform, but also how we feel about how we're performing. Perform is maybe a weird word to use when it comes to languages, but at the same time, at least I think about it as a musician. The third factor is very much a case-by-case basis. So not every situation when you call upon that second language, when I need to speak French or understand French or engage with French in some way, not every one of those is the same. Sometimes I am faced with a situation that I've faced a million times before. Sometimes I am really caught off guard by a situation, or there's a person with a slightly different accent than what I've been used to hearing, or somebody uses words or expressions that I've just never had the opportunity to hear before. And those individual circumstances don't necessarily reflect on my overall abilities in the language, even if it sometimes can feel like that. I think I might have muddled this point a little bit with the last one, but really how I want to separate these two is that the second factor that I was talking about really has to do with your general feeling and confidence level and situation in life. And this one is very much case by case, those individual interactions. That one moment of perceived error or that one lapse in ability or comfort or confidence does not necessarily mean that your entire language ability or skill is suddenly lower. You can have really, really dumb moments and really embarrassing or difficult or just awkward situations and moments, and that doesn't mean that you suddenly have a lower level or that your confidence in general is worse. For example, I will tell you, when I was in Montreal, I went to a store once and I went to the checkout to buy some stuff, and I don't know, she asked me something. I think she was asking me if I wanted a bag or something that I should have understood. And I just went blank, and she just immediately switched to English because, again, in Montreal, a lot of people, especially in the service industry, people who work at stores and stuff, a lot of people speak English and French really well. I didn't really know what to do, so I just responded in English, and then the rest of the little interaction was in English. And I left feeling so bad about my French. The thought that just kept going through my head was, can I not even buy a simple thing at a store and do those little interactions like, do you want a bag? Have a nice day. Like those simple things. I've been able to do that since 2017. How in 2024 am I not able to do that in French? And it just kept going through my head. It wasn't that that day started with me not feeling confident, but after that one isolated incident, I suddenly was questioning everything and my confidence just plummeted. But what I had to remind myself, and it did take a little bit of time, I will say, but what I had to remind myself is that everybody has moments. We have moments in our native languages too. And yes, I could confidently do that many years before. And now suddenly I had a moment where I couldn't do that. But many years before, could I have had a conversation about some in-depth topic? Could I have held meetings with my colleagues and understood all of their French and responded in French and interacted? Could I have done that in French that many years ago? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I would have been shaking in my boots. I would have been unable to open my mouth and say anything probably. I would have been so terrified and so out of my element. And now I can. After all of this blabbing, let's answer the big question. Let's answer the title. Do I still get nervous speaking French? Yes. Short answer is yes. I absolutely do. But it changes from time to time, situation to situation. And I've started looking at it very much as a much more complex, much more intricate and complicated question and also experience in my day-to-day life. The actual reality of nerves and anxiety speaking a second language is different than a simple question yes or no, than a simple progression up or down. It really is fluid and changeable and something that is constantly going to be growing in whatever direction, in a bad way, in a good way, a little bit of both. There is a lot of gray area in this, I guess, and I have to be comfortable living in it a lot more. I will say that since moving to the Netherlands and starting to learn Dutch, this is the first time I've gone back to absolute square one with a language and actually tried to learn it. Like I've dabbled in languages here and there. I've done a bit of German Duolingo. I've done a bit of Portuguese Duolingo, which I actually really want to get back to at one point. But I've never started from square one and actually had a goal because I'm living in the Netherlands now. So I really want to be able to do those little interactions in Dutch. And doing that has been eye-opening. I think I forgot what it was actually like to be at the beginning stages of a language, to actually know nothing in a language and to have no confidence, nothing to even build upon because I have no knowledge, or at least I had no knowledge. Now I have very little basic phrases that I can string together, but even then it's very hard to put them in my day-to-day life. It's still so simple and so basic and so much at the beginning stages. And I think I'd forgotten that. Hamlet is back. And then when I visited Paris last month, it was actually like a huge breath of relief, I guess, because I realized just how confident I was in French and how much I had actually learned in French. Going from, put in situations where I was trying to understand Dutch or wanted to say something in Dutch and just had nothing, like my brain gave me nothing. I had nothing, I don't have the knowledge in the language yet. to a place where I can fully interact with people and understand around me. I think that really just shed a light on how much I do actually know in French, which might be why, I don't know if you could tell in that vlog that I filmed, I have a lot more confidence than I think I was even expecting to have. There were ebbs and flows in my confidence, like usual, that is always the case, but generally those 3 days I was feeling really good because I was suddenly realizing in a way that I hadn't in a long time how confident I am and how much ability I have in French. How good I am, let's just say it. Let's be confident. I really hate giving myself compliments, but like, I'm good at speaking French. I'm not perfect. I'm nowhere near sounding like a native speaker, but I'm good at French. I'm competent in French. And I think that just kind of shed a light on my competencies in that language. By comparison, knowing what it is to actually be at the beginning. And I was at the beginning of French. I was where I am with Dutch, with French, 8, 9 years ago, and now I'm not.
You are really spoiled, my love. You feeling a little left out? And there's the other one. Hi, Bing Bing. Are you coming up?
Oh my goodness, we're getting the whole the whole family. Bingley, don't hurt yourself. Oh, he's gonna climb it. He's gonna climb it. Don't knock my coffee over, please. Oh my god. Bingley. This has turned into cat lady hour. That's every hour for me. This explains why all of my clothes are constantly covered in cat hair. I guess I should have filmed a video about cats today. I did not realize that these two were gonna make an appearance in this video. Okay, one is done.
Are you gonna stay there?
Oh. I knew he was gonna knock something over.
Poor Jim.
Anyway, this video has really gone off the rails, so I think it's time to wrap it up. If you are learning a second language right now, then I hope some of this or all of this has resonated with you. It's definitely something that all of us face to some extent. Maybe it's a huge factor in your decision to start learning a second language or not, or maybe it has been a factor in the past. It was definitely a huge part of why my Spanish never really got off the ground. I studied Spanish for years. I was very much involved in Spanish learning. I almost got a specialization at university in Spanish because I loved it, but confidence was always something that held me back. And I think kind of being forced to speak French in a way because I married a French person and I moved to France. There were just all these things that I really wanted to do that required me to learn French if I wanted to pursue those things, and I did. So I was kind of in a situation where I had to make the decision, do I want to do this or do I not? And I decided I do. So that was really the catalyst for me. But if confidence is something that is holding you back or has held you back, I hope this has helped. I hope this has resonated and maybe inspired you. It's something that we all face, and some of us more than others. So I am there right along with you. Even to this day, I am still there right along with you. It's something that's good to recognize, good to maybe think about and analyze and find solutions for, but definitely not to be ashamed of or, try to think that one day we're gonna be past it and it'll be behind us and we'll never experience that again. That's just not the way it works, especially for some of us, but for all of us to some extent. Let me know in the comments below if you are currently trying to learn a second language. What language is it? If you speak other languages, I would love to know. Maybe you are trilingual or multilingual, far more than me. That is very likely. Some of you guys are massively talented and I am constantly impressed. So let me know in the comments below. We can all boost each other's confidence together and pat ourselves on the back and just have a little moment to talk about languages. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon in another video.